Hi folks, welcome back to Murthy Finance Academy. So for years, there's been this hidden cost kind of buried deep inside every single iPhone, creating this multi-billion-dollar drag on Apple's profits. Today, we're going to do a full financial breakdown of what everyone started calling the Qualcomm tax.
Okay, let's start with the number that directly impacts the bottom line, the gross margins that shareholders watch like a hawk, $7.50. For every single iPhone sold, this was the fixed royalty Apple was paying Qualcomm. And get this, it wasn't for a physical chip, but just for the license to use their patents.
And you know that per unit cost? It all led to this number, a nearly $5 billion lump sum payment. Back in 2019, Apple wrote this massive check to settle a huge legal battle, and most of it was just back pay for royalties Apple had stopped paying in protest. So you see, it wasn't a fine from a court, it was just the cost of doing business.
Now, Apple's point of view on this was crystal clear. They basically saw it as a tax on their own innovation, a fee they felt should have already been baked into the price of the modem chip itself. So the big question for any analyst is, why on earth would Apple, a company famous for its iron grip on its supply chain, get locked into a deal like this?
Well, the answer really lies in Qualcomm's incredibly strong strategic moat, and it's built on two massive pillars, just unbelievably complex engineering and a legal position that was, for a long time, bulletproof.
This slide really gets to the heart of it. It shows this fundamental difference in engineering. Look, Apple are absolute masters of the clean digital world, the ones and zeros inside their amazing processors. But Qualcomm, they dominate the messy, chaotic, unpredictable analog world of radio waves. It's a totally different game.
And mastering radio frequency, wow, that is a whole other level of challenge. A modern modem isn't just some 5G chip, it's more like a symphony of technologies all playing in perfect harmony. It has to speak every cellular language, from ancient 2G all the way up to 5G, handle satellite links, switch networks so seamlessly you don't even notice, and, oh yeah, do it all without completely draining your battery. It's honestly one of the most technically demanding chips in existence.
So beyond the raw engineering, Qualcomm's real power comes from its huge portfolio of what are called Standard Essential Patents, or SEPs. Now, these aren't just clever ideas. These are innovations so fundamental to how cellular tech works that they are literally written into the industry standards. You actually cannot build a 5G phone without using them. It's impossible.
And this incredible legal position is what allowed Qualcomm to enforce its super controversial no license, no chips policy. As Tim Cook himself said, if you didn't agree to their patent licensing terms, they simply wouldn't sell you the modem. To put it bluntly, Apple was trapped.
Faced with this massive, recurring cost, Apple did what Apple always does. It launched a strategic, multi-billion-dollar countermove to try and build its way out of the problem.
This timeline really shows the whole saga, right? The escalating conflict and Apple's big strategic pivots. The legal war kicks off in 2017, but then ends abruptly with that huge 2019 settlement. But the real move came just 3 months later, when Apple went out and bought Intel's modem business to finally bring development in-house. But as we know, delays forced them to extend their Qualcomm deal, basically buying themselves more time.
And the absolute centerpiece of Apple's strategy was this: a $1 billion acquisition of Intel's smartphone modem business. Now, Apple wasn't just buying a division. What they were really buying was talent and intellectual property to kickstart their path to independence.
I mean, for that price, Apple basically bought itself a massive head start. They onboarded 2,200 experienced engineers, they got a huge portfolio of patents. All of it was to accelerate the development of their very own modem and finally break free.
So after all these years and all that investment, what's the actual state of this new asset? Let's do a little reality check on Apple's first-generation modem, which is codenamed the C1.
In the beginning, optimism was really high. I mean, Qualcomm itself told investors it expected to supply only 20% of iPhones by 2023, but that whole plan just collapsed. Supply chain reports confirmed the project had failed to meet its super aggressive deadlines, and that forced Apple to go right back to Qualcomm for its flagship iPhone 15.
So if we put them head to head, you can really see the gap. Apple's C1 modem is functional, sure, but it's also limited. Crucially, it lacks millimeter wave support. That's the technology that gives you those blazing fast 5G speeds in crowded cities. It also has less advanced carrier aggregation, which means it can't combine as many cellular signals for that top-tier performance. Look, it's a solid first effort, but it's not a flagship killer, not yet.
So because of this technical gap, Apple adopted a very pragmatic, a risk-averse rollout strategy. They're going to debut this first-gen modem in a lower volume device, the iPhone 16e, basically using it as a real-world test. The plan from there is to iterate, expand it into the mainstream models by the iPhone 17, and then eventually target a full deployment across the entire lineup sometime after 2027.
And this reveals a really major strategic shift for Apple. The goal is no longer to beat Qualcomm at their own game. No, the new, much more realistic objective is simply to match them, to build a modem that is just good enough to replace the Qualcomm chip without the customer ever noticing. And in doing so, they eliminate that royalty fee for good.
Okay, this brings us to the final section of our analysis, the forward outlook and the path to what's called margin accretion for all the shareholders out there.
The clock is officially ticking. Apple's current patent license with Qualcomm, which was a strategic necessity, by the way, to avoid getting sued for infringement the second they launched their own chip, it now has a very firm expiration date, March 2027.
And this is the long-term financial payoff. This is what it's all about. Once that license expires and that $7.50 royalty is gone, shareholders can expect a direct, very significant improvement in iPhone gross margins. This entire multi-billion-dollar saga has been about reaching this one single financial goal.
So, assuming the successful execution of this strategy to vertically integrate and conquer a major cost center, well, it leads us to a final forward-looking question. Once the modem problem is solved, what's the next big margin headwind that Apple is going to set its sights on? If you liked the video, please do like, share, and subscribe to Murthy Finance Academy.